Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. It's a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property, just as the founding fathers would want it to be. Today, we're gonna focus on business growth and strategy, personal branding, and what makes good networking. Today's special guest is from the Lone Star State, Carson Gibbons. Carson, how are you doing today, my friend?
Good, Ross. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be on today.
Thank you for joining. We were just talking a little bit off air about how Texas has been seeing tons of growth and tons of natural disaster stuff going on. Luckily, you were traveling when the bad stuff happened. But can you tell me a little bit about what is it like? Like, first of all, what's your background? Like, have you always been Texas native, or did you transplant like so many of the residents today?
No, I'm a real one. So I will wear that badge proudly. I'm a real Texan, born in Fort Worth, Texas, actually. Always been a DFW native. I've left to go and live in Baltimore as well as San Francisco. Traveled a bunch, but finally got to that point in my life where I decided that it's 2 hours from each coast. It's a $200 flight to anywhere in the world with DFW as a hub. Low cost of living. Just followed in my family's footsteps, who have been creating businesses out of the DFW market for several generations now. So to your point, Texas is always in the news for both like economic reasons as well as these natural disasters and agency responses. And you were alluding to the road trip that I was just on with my partner, where we were skirting some of the flooding disasters a week or two prior to them happening. And it's just insane to see, but it's a huge economic factor. What is it, the eighth or ninth largest kind of economic entity in the world? So there's a lot of news about that. And growing up in one of the suburban areas of Dallas called Plano, which at the time was kind of the northernmost burb, if you will, it's been crazy to watch the growth. I think it's just been de facto, almost basic table stakes. Like, I grew up and it was just always growing and that was the expectation. But now that I'm in the breadbasket of my career and you see things like the Texas Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, doing Y'all Street and kind of doing Dallas flagships, it's like, it's not stopping. It's continuing. The pandemic, state income tax situations, incentives, the Fortune 5 relocations to Austin. It is good to see the national media giving Dallas Fort Worth more of its due instead of just focusing on Austin. But it's never slowed down. It's a great time to be here in this market.
Yeah, I had a friend growing up. I'm from central Pennsylvania, which, I mean, if you're a football fan, like, you think that we would hate each other, but I really have a lot of friends and admiration for Dallas, being out of the Philly area. And one of my friends actually moved to Plano and then Frisco. Growing up, his father was in the oil industry. And I think for a long time, Texas was synonymous with like oil, right? But it's not, like, as you alluded to before, it's not that way so much anymore. There's fintech, there's, entrepreneurship, there's, heck, Brazilian jiu-jitsu capital of the world now is Austin. It's
and
like
comedy.
And comedy, exactly. And you alluded to the pandemic, and one thing when I was doing research on real estate trends back in that time, I was private equity and looking at like real estate as well. It's like Texas and Florida were the top two states with migration patterns during the pandemic, and the states that had the highest, like, for inbound new residents and for exodus was California, New York, and then Illinois, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Probably Philly area was like around at the top 5. So there's a reason that people are, like my neighbor, moving.
I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions from
I'm
those
not going to
trends.
say what the reasons are, but you can't deny the numbers.
They get it back. We have issues with our property taxes and different things like that. So the state income tax havens, they make it on the back end somehow, some way. But Texas has a fervent desire from our legislators, like, whether they're good guys or not, they have a burden on their heart for business and jobs. And I think they kind of always lead with that lens and that perspective. It's been cool to kind of get into Dallas Meetup and further into the Dallas culture of business and networking and recognize that this growth is something that, is being externally witnessed. Like, we kind of always just, like I said, grown up around it. But to your point, there's so many folks that are transplants. I feel like I used to be able to go out to a bar and meet folks that, I grew up in Frisco or Plano or Richardson. And now everybody is a transplant, it would seem.
Well, for better or worse, in a microcosm, my hometown was labeled the coolest small town in America at one point, and then you just see the population after that article launched like completely shift. like double that the median household income and wealth generation. Oh man, I'm glad I'm not a first time home buyer trying to get back into the hometown market here. And like
Was
you
this
said,
Allentown?
the Lidditz,
Let
Pennsylvania.
it. Okay.
A lot of that was generated by, there was a few industries that just exploded. One of them was around Clear Global, $1 billion plus like conglomerate that do sound engineering, like event production, think like the Super Bowl or like Taylor Swift concerts. But then tons of them all over the world started here in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, and then the word kind of got out, and that company's grown and really driven a lot of international talent and people that just like the scene.
Isn't it crazy how one large company or economic moat can change a whole community and like outlook and clustering of like-minded individuals? I was listening to a podcast the other day about Louisiana's economic woes and the fact that they only have one or two Fortune fives in the entire state. And I think it was actually Theo Vaughn talking to Ro Khanna of all people, and Ro is, in a $5 trillion district out in Silicon Valley. It's just that clustering of wealth and economic power is such it's something to focus on, obviously. And so I'm glad to see that our Texas folks have been.
And I'm glad that you mentioned comedy, because it's like one world's top podcaster moves to Austin, and it's like, look at the trickle down effect of like what happened to the whole state, not just Austin.
It's a new entertainment mecca where you're shooting your special for comedy, for music, all the podcasters. Like when Joe went to Austin, and I'm a big fan of Tom Segura and his wife, their podcast moving, they run like a syndicate, like an accelerator for podcasts at this point. So much of that was going on down there. And I have to share that one of my last market like territories that I was devoted to in my last corporate job was New York. And so I would always fly in on a Monday, run down to McDougal Street to Comedy Cellar and jump on standby to go to a comedy show. And my last time going down to Austin for Texas Venture Gala, I was on a super connector panel for Texas super connectors. I had the same vibes going into Austin as I used to in New York, where I'm like, I got to go get on standby because 6th Street now has 5 or 7 comedy clubs, one of which is sold out to the wall, through the end of the year. Joe's Club, Comedy Mothership. But the acceleration of the environment around it is just insane. Like you can go it's arguably second only to New York at this point in terms of a scene.
And then if you look at the trend patterns, it's like, how long will it be only second to New York, right? If things continue, it would supersede, presumably. I also think that the topic of comedy, I'm liking that we're going down this train of thought. We talked a little bit about some tragedy, and it's like the only antidote, in my opinion, to trauma or pain is like, how do you give somebody else a reason to laugh or smile? And I think that Texas does such a great job, and Texas and comedy, of just like making people happy, right? Like, sure, you talk about the economic outlook, which is favorable. You talk about like normally weather patterns are like, you'd rather be in Texas during the winter than like Chicago, right? Those things have influence on people's happiness, but like it's also having access to that kind of entertainment. I think it's hard to quantify, but if you have a higher quality of life through just a happier place to live, I mean, obviously you're a Texas native. I don't need to, brag about it too much, but it's probably a lot more.
Educate me on state pride.
Yeah, I mean, there's just different type of state pride when I visit Texas, so I really appreciate that. I'll leave it at that. So, state pride. Another thing you mentioned was you have generations of entrepreneurs in the DFW area. How has growing up in that type of family affected you and then helped you with your career path? Like, well, the simplest question is, what did you always want to be when you grew up, and was it influenced by your family's entrepreneurial record?
Of course, everything is influenced by my family growing up in a good Bible Belt, good Christian Southern household here. I would say I can't even comment on the alternative of what it would have looked like had I not grown up in that environment. I view it as something that it's not a causal, like retrospective, oh, now that makes sense. It's like it was an enabling path for what I've done in my life. Like what we're doing with Dallas Meetup has only been a year in the works, and it kind of feels like an overnight success to many people looking in. And I made a comment to somebody the other day that, no, my granddaddy had to start a business selling insurance in downtown Dallas in 1960 across from the original Neiman Marcus and fall in love with the city to just glorify it and, romanticize it, to my mother growing up, who then would in turn move from Fort Worth to Dallas, set up shop here. My parents would start their corporate real estate tenant advisory firm here and talk about it over the dinner table all growing up. You were talking about how do we get our start in business? Never forget, I was playing Nerf ball basketball in my room. I was 12 years old. I had one of those dunk hoops that you put on the closet door. And my dad walked in and said, "What are we doing here? You need to start a business." And I was like, I'm a kid, I'm playing Nerf ball here. And he goes, "Well, you need to start a business or I'm going to set up a pile of wood on one side of the yard and have you move it to the other side of the yard. So you can choose whether or not you want your efforts remunerated or just for the character building." So I got out, made flyers, started my first landscaping company, built it, from nothing to, I think at my peak, I had 15 lawns and some landscaping projects, and it funded my first truck and social experiences through high school, going out to college. And so that was kind of my first foray into business. I will share with you that I was probably resentful of, having to do that, having that experience. I was watching friends go out and play organized sports or whatever they were doing, play video games. And I was relegated to a Game Boy, Oregon Trail, and having to start a business. And now looking back, it's, they did the right thing, choosing to stress that I spend my time in different ways, because it just helped me overcome my fear factor. You get to a point in your career where you can just speak to everyone and you have something ubiquitous to kind of sell and inspire them with. And I think that starting at an early age, selling to adults and different things like that it was instrumental for both myself and my sister.
It's funny. I have a 3-year-old and my wife and I agree heavily on whatever she does. I want her to learn how to sell. And I think you don't learn how to sell by reading a book or playing a video game or watching, listening to podcasts. Sure, those things can help, not saying they don't, but it sounds like at 12, you can either walk from one end of the yard to the other with a bunch of sticks, or you can walk door to door and knock on some doors and try and, make something happen. And I think if that was how your customer acquisition channel was, I'm just assuming.
The frustrating thing is that I didn't grasp the lesson as quickly as I could have. I could have already been, a multi-millionaire liquid had I harnessed the lesson that it is he who sells it wins. Like I told a friend last night, we did a video shoot for one of our Dallas meetup partners that's coming on board. And I was talking to a friend about scaling his video agency, and I was kind of like, "Hey, if this goes well, you're just a staffing firm. That you're scoping. It's a matter of like how much applied scoping layer are we providing to this deliverable? Are we just delivering the body? Here's the videographer, or are we delivering the actual finished product? Based on your trajectory, you want to sell projects." And so had I harnessed that lesson, what it taught me was that I did not want to be the guy with the weed eater. I did not want to be in the mulch bed. I hated the physical labor component, struggling with the line, getting jammed up in my weed eater and all this. I ended up taking a lot of satisfaction from that, but the real lesson should have been my unique ability is spent door to door selling and liaising the actual sale. Who fulfills it? Who cares? You could sell that contract to the next guy. Whoever Alex's lawn service the next day, and it's M&A, right? That's all anybody is doing. If you can just prove the pipeline, it reminds me of a story where I went to an early stage startup that was pivoting, going from B2C to B2B. And I just lost my train of thought on that. They were contracting with like a leads agency, and the leads agency produced 12 shaky meetings, right? At best. And then I come in, I beast mode 100 discovery calls, land the first 25 recurring revenue subscription customers. But my W-2 employee pay was far less than the contract that had been paid to the partner agency to produce 12 shaky meetings. So
was that early on in your career?
Yeah. I mean, there was a 7.5-year period where there was like no money making in my life. Like I went 18 months without a paycheck and actually put money into a company. That was the first startup that we went to Y Combinator with. And that was an exercise of trying to thread the needle to get that company funded, like get enough momentum to get it funded and or cash flow positive that we could pay ourselves and I could quit hemorrhaging cash. But I spent my life savings on trying to see that one through. And it ended up giving me the Y Combinator credentialing that's been very beneficial in my career and helped me land my second startup job, which was still probably sub-market base pay, heavy on the equity options.
Been there.
So a lot of lot of equity in some of these startups, but not necessarily taking home the bag to show for that. I forget how we got on that
No,
original.
but we can keep on this topic as I've got some tangential
Please.
reflection. Man, it is number one for everyone listening, and Carson, you can test this. You talked about several businesses you started that are not the business you're currently doing, and I think people's fear is they're afraid of going from what's considered like the stable W-2 corporate job to their first entrepreneurial endeavor. And it's like, but once you've done it once, the second one becomes easier. And once you've failed or, taken some pretty heavy losses, you just get better and better and better and better and better the more you do it. So it's like, look, if you can go from 0 to 1, you can go from 1 to 7. You can go from, in terms of like business, like launches, and the probability of success increases actually the more you fail. Right? You said the Y Combinator thing was like not cash. You were putting money into it. You're bleeding money, but then that helped you to get to where you're at with the credential and the experience. So someone called it before paying down the dumb tax. You got to pay it
They used
eventually.
to say They used to say just your only mission is to stay live. Like he who
Uh-huh.
wins is the one that is alive next quarter and just outrun the competitor that the bear is chasing with you, so to speak. But if you can prove the sales model and have that in hand, you can go contract that with whatever fulfillment aspect you're going to get. So that is the lesson there. And it was an interesting one that I've connected with later in life. And I wish I'd grasped more in that
I
moment.
know. I have the same. I don't want to say regret, but the same chastisement of my past. It's like, man, if I only knew what I know now back then, I wish that at this moment in time was the lesson, and it's so evident to me now later, but it wasn't evident to me then. Like, what would life be like? I totally get it. One thing comparable to your story is I grew up in an entrepreneurial family as well. My grandfather's had an entire career in the military, but then after that was like entirely self-employed, entrepreneurial, just building, starting, running, operating businesses. And he was like an engineer and a fighter pilot. So I was like, okay, what? But he was more like the systems and the org, like very systematic and like deep thought. And I had a father who did like door-to-door sales all the time, like door-to-door sales in college, and then sales, got into real estate commercial sales. And I would, listen to
That
them.
lineage completely explains you, by the way. The precision of a systems grandfather and then the vivacious salesman nature of a door to door sales father. You being the product of that is very, sorry to derail you there,
No,
but
no, you're good. And I like, but hearing from you, it's like, well, I wouldn't be. I like you're like I was baked into this with the dinner table conversations. I'm like, yeah, you take for granted because you think everyone. You don't realize when you're growing up that like this is abnormal to other people, right? When people don't talk about money, don't talk about business, they don't talk about what's going on. It's like the way we grew up. It was like I remember being in fourth grade, putting on a suit and having like a whiteboard and doing a sales presentation because my dad told me to. And it's like, it felt dumb at the time, but I was like, this is actually the greatest thing you pushed me to do at that age.
you know what it boils down to a lot. And I've noticed this. My partner's family is well off. They,
Mhm.
exited from early stage company, doubled down on that equity situation and did very well for themselves. Don't talk about things like we do. It's the transparency layer. There's something about that suit and that whiteboard around the dinner table that, hey, give us your faux, mock presentation. It stresses like, well, here's my unit economics. Here's what I'm thinking about the future. It's a transparency layer where it's like, what'd you pay for that? What was the cost to acquire that customer? When you start hearing that, and it's also phrased objectively, right? Like
Yes.
it's not one of the things you alluded to when it like gets easier to like go to market, the more you do it, the more pain or failure you experience. It's like you're more objective about your own, for me, my own
Yes.
self-worth. Like at one of my last startups, if I didn't sell that recognition software SKU to that company, I had one product to sell, I was a failure. And a lot of my self worth was wrapped up in that. Meanwhile, my CEO had prior exits and mountains that he'd climbed where he could come into a call and almost be flippant with it and talk around things, not having this or not having that. He had something to anchor his self worth off of external to that experience. And so it's like he could couch, hey, if this doesn't work out, like I am who I say I am. This venture is going to be successful. You should onboard. Whereas I'm like, will you please onboard? There was something to that.
Mm.
I think I'm more successful in this go to market because we haven't stressed it. It was perfect providential timing. It was my unique ability and what I've applied my
And it's your
10,000 hours to.
backyard, Carson. Like your grandparents' generation loved it. Your parents' generation loved it. You love it. It's like you got it in your blood. You got it in your backyard. I don't know.
And
There's
then
something to be said.
this caravan from both coasts has been coming for the last 30 years,
Yep.
with
Yep.
increasing velocity. And I never thought, the funny part, Ross, is that I always prided myself on, I'm going to be the high tech SaaS guy. I'm going to,
Sure.
make my fortune with, being a co-founder of some platform that everybody uses. And
Yep.
now I'm like the professional networking guy that I never wanted to be. And it's the thing that's opened all the doors. And by applying the knowledge of activating the content marketing machine and SEO and focusing on the digital facade and housing, the distribution, the moat, so to speak, the defensibility layer, it's opened more doors for me than any of the high tech SaaS opportunities or even Y Combinator. And so it has me showing up a little sheepish at times, but it is a platform that adds a lot of value to a lot of people, many of whom are new to this market.
It goes back to something, and you alluded to it, and I want to put a quote to it. It's like confidence is not, this is probably an Alex Ramosi quote loosely. Confidence is not standing in front of the mirror and shouting affirmations. It's building a stack of evidence that becomes undeniable that you are who you say you are. Right. And that's sort of what you talked about with that executive when you were the salesperson, where you were like, please onboard. And he was like, I don't care if you onboard. He might have had a higher close rate because he had a confidence that was earned. And now, through where you're at in your career, you've earned a confidence through the experiences decade after decade. And that's one thing. If I could go back in time, I would just move faster in the short term, not like spend less time reading books and thinking about the thing that I want to do, and then spending more time getting market research and feedback, doing it. Right. And I learned that lesson in my later 20s. And I'm like, wow, if I would have learned that 10 years ago, where would I be today?
That part is hard. Like the shoulda, woulda, coulda, water
Yeah.
under the bridge. Cause I feel in some ways after the last year of my life, especially the last 6 to 9 months with local news coverage, like local business recognition, like I don't want to say fame, but certainly walking into rooms where I don't know people, but they know me. That's
Right.
a newfound thing. And in some ways, I feel like I've never been professionally alive prior to this. And it's like, oh my goodness, I had to slog through all of these problem areas to see the issue that we would step out onto a limb and just, can this hold my weight? And then it's like, oh yeah, it can hold your weight and a bunch of other people's weight too. Like the market needs this. And we kept getting that validation and kept getting pulled to market, and kept growing as a result. That's the position that you want to be in. I had just never thought that, you talk about the origins. My first full year out of school, I went to 55 networking events. This was 2012. And it was one of our activity metrics, a cold call that you connected was a point, a drop off where I connected with somebody physically and like gave them a koozie or something was 10 points, an actual CV, a client visit where we sat down and I got information, that was 20 points. A skill market on email was 1 point. So I was going to these networking events to try to log calls, and it ended up, I dated around to see who I wanted to go deep with. And then in the 20 teens, that was American Marketing Association. And so I spent 4 years ascending to their executive board and becoming president-elect, only to resign to go to Y Combinator. When I did come back, I joined the Dallas Entrepreneur Center as their chairman of their associate board. So I had 10,000 hours of not-for-profit leadership, fiduciary board leadership under my belt. And I saw post-pandemic, this is broken. Like as young professionals, we're paying annual dues to organizations to essentially work for them, disseminate their information, and propagate their membership model to something that leads behind a paywall that you probably don't use a whole lot. And that's a failing model. You're only as good as the not-for-profit, like represented likeness team that you came back from the pandemic with. That's as good as the executive lunch and keynote that you can recruit is however good your team is, however good their caliber is. So there was a vacuum that we were able to step into that we were kind of unaware of. We had a supposition or a hypothesis, but it's proven to be a lot more rampant than we had ever imagined. And what we're now convicted of is that IRL experiences and a cross-generational community that meets routinely to give to get and add value That's going to become a luxurious experience in the new hybrid norm of remote work, AI, the new world that we're heading into.
It's so funny. I agree with what everything you're saying is spot on. But number two, it's the grass is greener. It's like when everyone was always in office, like people dreamed of remote positions. And then when COVID happened, you have all these people in remote positions are like, I'm very lonely. I miss rubbing shoulders to with my coworkers in person, or, doing client calls in person versus Zoom. So I agree. Like going
Goldilocks.
yeah, like going like in person, human to human versus these virtual things at this time and place you're at is like this perfect storm of market opportunity. And you see it, and I see it. And I love the mission you're talking about. Because look, an entrepreneur's job is to find issues in the market and then come up with a solution, right? And if you're not listening in the market, like, you said before, you had a representative job with sales or biz dev where you had a SKU, you had a thing to sell. But like when you are the one that creates the thing to sell, you can make sure it solves the problem that you're going after. And then the second thing that you mentioned that I have to drill down on is that networking when you give to get is so valuable, because I had a mentor once tell me, he goes, everything comes down to access and opportunities. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I was like, you're a real estate developer. What do you mean access opportunities? He's like, well, I own storage units. Like, you want to be my customer? You want to get access to my box for the opportunity to store your stuff. And then he named half a dozen other businesses. I was like, here's the access, here's the opportunity. With networking groups, it's like, we're going to bring good people with similar goals, and every sales business development person's job, like you said, you're measured on how many good people can you have meaningful connections with.
That's the whole brand aura. It's funny, like we're a for-profit LLC in terms of the way that we're like managed, the way that we didn't want to rule by consensus. We do have a large advisory board of executive organizers, but it very much is what we want to see in the world. And we just go out and we do that. We create that. Will you refocus me on your prompt there? I just lost my train of thought.
No, the train of thought that I had was, as an entrepreneur, as a salesperson, no matter what tech stack is out there, no matter what market trend is out there, your job is to listen and connect. I further, is opportunity and access. So for SaaS, it might be sexy to some people because it's like, oh, it's this new tech and it can make you opportunity to save you all this money or make you all this money. And then we sell by the user sheet. That's the access, however many users you get. So you get access to the suite. And your business model, what you thought you wanted to make your money on was kind of that, the SaaS. And now you're doing it with people. So I kind of wanted to, dig down on that.
This was started never to make money or become a day job. That's been a happy accident pulled to market. Like in some ways, we don't even have like a mission statement in some ways, because everything we've done is so reactive according to the market. Like we're just build, measuring, learning. We're trying to lean startup it. I remember what I was going to say surrounding like the LLC designation versus the three. Even though we're run that way, the product is that public benefit corporation altruistic aura, if you will. It's not a real product. It's, that regardless of the venue that we're physically meeting in or the cohort theme, because Dallas Meetup is always Big Ten industry agnostic in nature, we do showcase a new segment of the Big Ten quarterly. So we've done that for economic development, marketing, venture capital, health tech. We're going into our consumer packaged goods cohort. So we move that around, but regardless of who we're showcasing or where we're meeting, it's going to be good, high caliber executives practicing high durations of stay, and their value realization time horizons are not this quarter. It's a lifetime that they're looking forwards and backwards at. That's the real difference. We also see a lot of good couples, and just there's a morality clause almost where it's like by featuring all of these quality people that are not only civically engaged and on the bleeding edge of whatever it is they profess to do professionally, they're just good people. By kind of seeding the environment with those folks, we've never really had to make a whole lot of comments on dress, behavior. People just more caught than taught. They know how to act based on their aspirations. And that's what we really focus on, is the FOMO and the aspirational nature side of things. I had a featured networker call me after one of our last cohorts and say, whatever you have to do to protect that brand aura of good people looking to give to get, We do not do the color coded name badges. We do not enable you to like hawkishly work the crowd because you're looking to make a print sale that month. You need to be able to articulate your elevator pitch in 2 sentences or less, add value, even if it's across another vertical. You might be helping somebody get their kid into a school. That might come back to you tenfold in the future if you're planning on doing business in Dallas for any period of time.
I liken brand to a bouquet of flowers, and it's the arrangement. To make the analogy, it's like your networking group. There, you got a bunch of flowers or individuals or members that just fit and are appealing, and other people on the outside like are attracted to it, right? The aura. But if you were to have like a freaking dandelion in there, it would ruin the whole thing, right? Like you can't. You have to be selective. It's not because you don't care about people. It's because you care about them so much, right?
That's unfortunately reared its head where folks that you can't recommend for their shingle, like for their what they profess to do for their day job, if you can't recommend them, they can't represent the brand. You know, it is a dandelion situation. That's a really apropos analogy. And it's also my greatest privilege because I just created the walls and the platform that other people's logos and faces bring the lifeblood and circulation to.
Sure. But like somebody had to do it. I'm glad it was you, right?
Me
There's
too.
a market need. Like you said, you're very reactive because you're so busy. You're so busy listening to the market and being like, how can I supply this demand? I think.
Well, I'm giddy in many ways because again, it's fun. It's like you're never working when you're working in your unique ability. And this is very public. I'm almost super spoiled and blessed because with undue risk comes undue reward. And if you're willing to like shoulder the burden of the initial sweat equity and the cost of something to set it up, and then it's a platform that enables others deal flow, others hiring, others network and community growth, you kind of reap all the harvest from that, which almost feels undue, right? Like when you have 1,500 people at a meetup and they all talk to 5 people, and of that, certain deals and hiring is being made, we're talking about tens of thousands of potential connection points where technically Dallas Meetup is getting tagged. They're the origination point. Conversely, if you were here in Dallas, Ross, and you were one of our executive organizers or even just an attendee, and you told somebody, hey, come with me to Dallas Meetup, you're their origination point. Like you get the credit. They're like, man, Ross knows what he's talking about. Like Dallas Meetup really slapped last night. I got a lot of great coffee meetings from that. You get the credit. So it's like this favor cart platform where everybody just has their back scratched.
Well, it's
and
compound
to get to set
interest.
that up is fun. Yeah,
it's compound interest,
true.
Right? Like at the beginning, you're putting the deposits, whether that's with cash or sweat equity or time or goodwill. But when you put enough goodwill, I am a firm believer. It might have been Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn that says to get what you want out of life, you got to help enough people get what they want. And it's like, I mean, look, take religion or politics or whatever moral comments you want out of the equation. It just makes sense if you just look at like networking as a form of compound interest, or how many people can you help without an expectation of something in return. The universe will likely reward you on a time horizon, one shape, form, or another, or it'll come back around. Like there's a science to altruism.
There really is, and it's so hokey until you start to experience that power, because it's like, okay, the Oprah, like manifest it or meditate or pray or all of that. Once you start to see it though, and realize like we are our own greatest limitation, like my own worldview, my own outlook, my own blinders. And if I truly help people and for lack of a better phrase, if I get off on helping others accomplish their goals, my goals are going to be accomplished tenfold. Once you really start to embody that authentically for the right reasons, you start to realize like, oh, this is what they were talking about that I always thought was just snake oil.
Well, and it goes back to the experience you had as like a more junior salesperson with the more senior executive in the sales structure. Like that person has enough experience to know, hey, I want to help people that want my help. And if you're someone that doesn't want my help, or you're a dandelion and I'm looking for this beautiful bouquet, like it's an easy filter to say yes, no. And I'm sure like if I could expedite a problem to solve for people from a marketing perspective or a growth perspective, it's like you have to understand who are your people, who do you want to help, right? And if you can figure that out, then like the helping part's easy. Like you said with the landscaping company, it's like getting the contract is the job. Doing the weed eating, we can figure out how to help you. Like, that's not the part you stress out about, right? But you can be the world's best landscaper, and if you don't know how to sell, like, you're not. Then you're just the world's most sadly unemployed person.
You realize these tech-infused SMBs or startups are just speculatively going out to market with a website shingle and trying to sell the lawn maintenance for a particular price point. Maybe it's $20 today. And the fulfillment aspect, we'll figure that out in the future. Like, we might not turn a profit until we IPO. We'll figure out, oh, it cost us $40 to mow a $20 lawn, and we're just trying to bring that cost to acquire a customer, that fulfillment aspect down. So it's almost like startup is almost reverse in some ways. So you spoke earlier about you might be the 0 to 1 person. And if you can get it 0 to 1, you can go 1 to 7. I've always thought about it like, if I can get it 0 to 1 and get this child fed, it'll start to walk next to me and give me more opportunities where I can like go hire people and backfill my incapable areas. If I can prove the 0 to 1, there will be enough sustenance there for others to come and take it 1 to 7.
And everyone listening, Carson, you're right. Like, I agree with you. And the way you phrase that, if you think of it as like terminal, binary, it's either a success or a failure. Of course, people have analysis paralysis. Of course, they're going to be locked up. Of course, it's going to be stressful and from places of scarcity. But if you look at it like infinite iterations, like, you just have to start and then you iterate. The more you learn and get better, and the more you get market feedback signals, and success and wins are just objective data inputs. Like you said, your partner's family table looked at money and doing business objectively. It's like, the more you can like disassociate your ego and self-worth from the current finite aperture lens of the now, and look at like, okay, how does this influence where I want to be down the road? Like, how is this helping me? How can I help others with this new information? Like, I look back at the business I do now, and really, it's the same business, just infinitely evolved from my first business. Like your example of the lawn care company. Like, I was just like a college kid who didn't know anything about business, but like knew I wanted to help my good buddy's family business. And I learned what SEO was, right? Like, didn't know what it was. Like, let's try it out. Let's build a WordPress site. Not the best designer, but like, let's make something that looks clean and professional. I don't know. I don't think I charged for it. I was just like, can I help you to get a portfolio, like to get a project under my belt? And then I did it again, and I got a little bit better. It was easier. And like, didn't charge for that. It was my dad's family. It was my dad's, one of his entrepreneurial businesses. Cause it was like, I was trying to give back to the family. Like, hey, your business is struggling now because of stuff going on. Let's get you the first page of Google. And then boom. So I look at my business now. It's like, I never really went from 1 to 7. I just went from 0 to 1 and then iterated a bunch of times. And now I'm back to where I'm at, just better.
Well, you went 1 to 7. Everything you're doing is maybe the same or the same process or same unit economics. You went 1 to 7 as an individual and a professional. You have much more context as to what's occurring now. That's the big term for me, is like context, like understanding. Used to be, I'd walk into a corporate environment and I'm just trying to furiously scribble everything that's said because I don't understand a word of it. I want to get it back into my CRM at my iMac, rooted to my cubicle in a physical location in an office park.
I know.
Now it's like, why would you take a note on everything? I mean, obviously have AI do it, but most of what's said in a meeting is, neither here nor there. It's like, do we have an agreement? Are you going to champion this moving forward? I think that's one of the things that we talked about my last CEO, and the objectivity of his self-confidence being rooted elsewhere. I think that watching him for several years, especially around the age that I was, like kind of 29 to 32 at the time, it was very much a maturation from business boy to businessman in some ways. And I think a lot of that was just meditating, slowing down, never answering a hard question about pricing on email, understanding what the real thing is. In the discovery call, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. He would always want to understand the origin of a project, and like, why are you here, Ross? Like, you booked me on Capterra. You want to take a look at this platform, but why? Like, why would you want to? Like, what's in it for you as a person? Are you out here kicking tires, or was this sponsored by some sort of executive initiative that you're now assigned to? Are you reporting back to a committee on this? Like, oh yeah, my boss just said, look up this, and I chose the top 3. And
understanding human motivation. What's your motive, right? Like, what motivates you to be here? That's such a great, it applies so well because for you, you have a simple litmus test with Dallas Meetup. Is your motivation to give first? Okay, great. You're probably, let's continue on. Oh, you're here to fill quota in 2 weeks? Get lost, pal, right?
Yes, correct. 100%. Yeah, it was just instrumental seeing that because I watched this man crawl over the lack of a SOC 2 and all sorts of like governing documentation that a more mature funded startup would have had. And I was always, as a sales and go to market guy, kind of getting the runaround on, well, we need this documentation, we need SOC 2, we need XYZ. And I'll never forget, he would always just say something to the effect of, sounds like we need to have a team to team and establish some business trust. And actually, really, what's going on here? What seems to be the problem? You like the demo and the software. Yeah, the documentation you want is on our roadmap. And frankly, we would have already done it were we not so focused on innovating the product in a short amount of time. It's on the roadmap to do next April, but watching him talk around PII, his line for our personal proprietary information that we were storing is our PII is about as attractive as a 3-day-old ham sandwich in the sun. It's maybe first name, last name, and email. And the number of CTOs and chief counsels that signed off on org-wide licensing after these conversations, that was the lesson.
It's how do you connect with people, right? It's how do you connect with people? And it's like, look, I don't know if you have kids, but I'll tell you a quick child rearing story. I've got a 3-year-old who, so be careful what you wish for. I want her to learn how to do selling, and she's already like making deals. She'll negotiate, right? So the thing is, it's like she'll have objections if I ask her to do something like, hey, you got to eat dinner first. She'll object so fervently. But until I can figure out how to motivate and connect with my 3-year-old to convince her to do dinner, and I've gotten a lot better at this, by the way, a lot of practice. It's like, if you can convince that person and persuade that person, it's a hell of a lot easier, a rational agent that's fully grown adult, right? Because we do act at some part largely based off of emotion, like your motivation, your desire, aversions. And toddlers are unique because they're learning language and they're all emotion all the time. But if I can dissect, in the sales example, it's like identify and isolate the objection, like, oh, you don't want to eat this because it contains green beans. Okay, well, what if we just take the green beans out? Oh, sure, fine. As opposed to, you're going to eat it, whether you like it or not. It's like, that doesn't work.
To your point, if you can sell to her, like she's got factory settings right now, and she's developing the nuances of that ego that leads to all the lack of sales or lack of good feedback or whatever. Right now, you're dealing with the most pure form of like lizard brain. How do I market and sell to this person?
Yeah.
Because they're still at factory settings and they're developing all the protective barriers that'll be, I'll get back with you next week. No, now's not a good time. In some ways, she is a great test case for you to iterate on, because all of those pre-baked settings just have calloused layers of ego and protective barriers surrounding them 30 years from now when she's a corporate buyer.
And to the same point, the factory settings analogy is amazing, and I'm going to steal that after this. To the same point, we're doing potty training, right? That's the age between 2 and 3. You gotta stop going in your pants. Punishment does not work nearly as effective, I think, in my mind, as a reward system as like reward or as like praise. So it's like, hey, if you go on the toilet, I will give you an M&M. She goes, make it 2. I'm like, all right, fine, 2. So she goes, she does her thing. She goes, I did a great job and I washed my hands. 3. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, sure. She goes, okay, I'll choose them, like, because colors matter a lot to a toddler. She'll shove her hand in the bag and come out with 5. I said, how many did you grab? And she goes, I don't know. And eats all of them. I'm like, you just upsold me from 1 to 5. And I'm not protesting. Like there's something to be said about that too. I guess the lesson, this is funny because it just happened. I guess the lesson is once you have a personal connection and like the reward centers are firing, it's like, why not go for the home run, right?
Fulfill with dazzle and delight too. I mean, she took the steps necessary to get her hand in the bag, and then I landed and expanded while I was in here. My bad. But it wasn't boring either. There's something that's something that should be said, because I think we get so stale. Don't be boring. Like, I've gone down in flames with different business interactions that everyone acted morally and everything, but it didn't work out. And it's like, well, at least it wasn't boring. They're not going to forget this interaction and that I did hold my head high. But it wasn't forgettable. It wasn't boring.
You know what? That's actually interesting. It goes back to your give first mentality. If you can, go to a networking event or conference, whatever the social interaction is, and you can just make somebody laugh, or you can just tell a story that like sticks with them, like, oh wow. Now, I was stuck on a plane going out to Vegas. I'm kind of envious of your Dallas airport situation, by the way. I flew out of BWI, the 7 hour delay going out to Vegas. I'm sitting next to a guy for quite honestly like 12 hours. And we just got to talking, and like we are making each other laugh, making each other, get, really hitting home. And I'm like, most of the people on the plane aren't communicating with the people they're sitting next to. They're just like on their phone or miserable. And I'm like, I'm never going to forget this plane ride. It took a really crappy situation. And he was like, man, we got to stay in touch. But like, it was only because we just decided to invest in entertaining one another, and if you can just entertain
what was
someone.
the hook? There was a point of commonality or something that started that or kept it going at the point where you would likely abandon cart on the conversation, right? So what was
Yeah,
that thing? Was it geo, common connection,
it
skill set, profession?
wasn't any of that. It was sports. It was sports. He
The ubiquitous connection point.
it was to the degree that I think I told him that I was going to this conference, this and that, and then he's, oh, well, what do you do? And I'm a fractional CMO. I said, I'm sort of like a coach in a way. He goes, oh, I'm a coach. Like, oh, what do you coach? Basketball? Oh, high school basketball. And then we just talked about coaching for like 5 hours because I coach sports too. And then he told me that the person who hosts Sports Center was one of his basketball players, and this and that. It's just like, wow, what an interesting cat. So anyway, I
Shared
figured,
interest, core
yeah,
tenet of building a stronger relationship.
but isn't it though? Like, in your Dallas meetup, like, the question I have for you, I know I'm telling stories, but the question I have for you is like, what are some of the tips and tricks to build a personal connection? Because people do business who they know, like, and trust. Like, how do you give, liking and trusting and networking at, like, because it's a hard thing to cultivate, and you've done quite a bit of network.
One of the managing directors at one of my old jobs told me that he's like, in this job, you're going to be, sometimes you'll be the driver of the car. Sometimes you'll be in the passenger seat with the Rand McNally, like Atlas, map. Other times you'll be backseat driving and then, maybe picking out the music, but you have a role in that pursuit, so to speak, and know your role and just add that value, so to speak. I'm sorry, your question with Dallas meetup.
Yeah, it's like in networking with dealing with people you never met before. Like, what are some things you found effective to make a connection that's real, like a real connection?
Back to his story, he was like, the minimum criterion for being in the car is to be trusted, liked, and respected. That sums up your entire business aura. Where am I approachable? Is it like, can I have a good conversation with Ross? Do I find him capable and credentialed and relevant? Trusted, liked, and respected is what you should be working on for your own perception of yourself. So if you just kind of think about who you want to be in 5 years and act that way tonight at the networking event, everything's going to go peachy. I would say, like, bring your friends and look to make connections for others. Like, I think one of the greatest satisfaction moments in my life is when I nail a referral. And I don't care about a referral fee, or like, it's when the service provider calls me and says, we're going to be able to help them so much. They're giddy. They're like, this is right in the middle of our fairway. They have the exact inflection point of like revenue and addressable market. Like, this is our bread and butter. You nailed it. Knowing what that looks like, having seen that movie so that I can replicate that, that means the world to me. Doing that at scale, just think about trying to do that at scale across an entire networking room. You'll be the toast of the town. You'll be adding value to everyone around you. So
Yeah,
I think
that's interesting.
It's not about pushing business cards. It's just about meeting folks. And things that I ask now that I'm 35 versus 22, I'm not thinking about it in terms of logging the client visit or the call to the CRM. I'm thinking about how do I get to that personal connection more readily? So if you were here in Dallas, Ross, I'd be like, where do you live? Grapevine? Whereabouts? There's a lot of commonality. A lot of times I've been on corporate calls living here in downtown Dallas and realized I was in the same building once as somebody that I was on a call with, and I would have never known that if I hadn't asked them where they were. Oh, whereabouts in Dallas? Oh, whereabouts in Victory Park? Like, and they kind of think I'm crazy. But getting to that more quickly and having a reference point to follow up on. Hey, I'm a coach. Hey, we live in the same neighborhood. We went to the same church. I know the same person. That's the number one anchor fulcrum point that you could ever have is we have a shared mutual connection that we both respect and want their ongoing respect. So we're going to treat each other with respect because we don't want a bad report card going back to our mutual contact that we both esteem. If you just think about things in that manner, that there's cliques and there's groups and
you can't lose.
People talk.
You can't lose. When you make connections for others, first of all, you did a good thing. Second of all, it's a higher likelihood that you yourself will benefit from net new connections. Great. Secondary accident. But like if you're interested in others, the way you ask the question, for those that are listening can't see, like when you were role playing at a networking event, you like perked up and your inflection went up. I could tell from your body language you're actually interested, even in the role played question. Where do you live? You know, it's like how you ask the question displays interest. And if you want to be perceived at the end of the day as interesting, I would say one of the best ways is to be interested in others and in connection points and in things and in helping. I don't know. I appreciate that role play. That was pretty sick.
Some of this too isn't necessarily going to help you crush this quarter's sales goal, but it will help you more quickly get to the dream role where you're operating in your unique ability. Because if you do run around and give to get, and you're helping somebody in a vertical that's not going to buy the SaaS software licensed product you're selling that quarter, maybe you lose that job, but maybe you get into a job that maybe you make a lot of contacts that actually steer you in the path that you're going to have more happiness and success in. A lot of this advice is almost more high level anecdotal, looking over a professional's life versus, logo bug that's on their LinkedIn today.
Yeah, but I don't want to downplay the importance of playing infinite games versus finite games. Like when you're playing with a long enough runway where you're saying like, how can I make invest in my life, like the entirety of the career, then you give yourself the opportunity to actually achieve remarkable things versus if you're constantly stuck on, okay, this day's activity, this week's KPI, this quarter's number, if you're always stuck in the weeds, like you never get to build the life or career you really want to.
100%.
Well, Carson, that's been absolutely invigorating conversation for me. Learned a bit. One question that I have for you, this is my favorite part of the show, is leave a question, ask a question. So the last guest, without knowing who you are, has this question for you, and I will do my best to interpret it. First part of it is, what are you currently reading? But more importantly, what are you not reading? In other words, what are you applying in action that you should be doing more and thinking of less?
Okay, say the follow-up piece again. I'm currently reading Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Get unstuck, reclaim your freedom, and build your empire. This has been, my dad actually assigned this to me. He sent it to the house. He had it delivered. So if he delivers a book and just lets you know it's assigned reading. But it's really great for this time that I'm in right now where you think you're busy and it's like, are you? Are you busy with the right things? Like, could we actually focus on this and Marie Kondo this schedule? So focusing on my time is worth X dollars per hour to the company. And I better not spend my time on a $10 activity if my time's worth $100. So identify all the activities that are scaled across employees and pay them the actual $10 it's worth versus taking my time to do it when I should be focused on the $100 an hour activities. So Buy Back Your Time is,
that's a great,
this is a really great book.
You're like the third person in the last week that's recommended that book to me, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, man. One of my biggest things that I'm trying to work on. And it's so funny, man, because you had a landscaping company. And my wife, while I was traveling, like hired someone when I wasn't there because I love doing the yard work, which is not, by the way, unit economics appropriate for like what I do, right? And I was like upset at first, like, why'd you do that? She goes, because I just bought your time back at a discount. And I was like, I thought about it. Sometimes I was like, damn, she's right. Like she knows a thing or two. But you're spending time, you're investing your time right now learning on how to buy back your time. So you're paying in to your time management and your delegation now so that it pays off later. We don't have to worry about it stuff in the future. That's awesome.
In some ways, I'm just reading the book and becoming convicted of issues that are present in my professional life for the first time, which is sad, but you got to read the book to be compelled as to the pain. The second part of your question, what I'm not reading.
Yeah, what do you like? There's no benefit in me reading, because I think this applies to people that listen to the podcast, and I'm going to give them tough love. My goal with what I do is that you don't listen to every single episode and not change your behavior. If you want to build a business or make a career move, like listen to something and then go and do a bunch of things. And if you want to come back, great. But like, don't only listen to it and think about making a change. Go and do a change. And I think the same applies with reading or listening to podcasts, etc.
In some ways, what I'm not reading is like the last third of the book at times. Like you kind of get the point, and it's like I've read 50% of this book, but I've captured 80% of the gist that I can apply to my day to day, and I need to move on right now. Like, this last applied principle, I'll read through the framework, I'll do the guidebook or whatever. That's probably something that I'm not reading at times. I've finished my last 3 books, but I have noticed that if it's not like a Gladwell, if it's something like process oriented, or there's been several books that I'll send you that I've read lately that cover to cover that I really liked. But the only other thing I would say is like bleeding edge periodicals that ChatGPT would surface. Like, I think what I'm paranoid about is the lack of prompt engineering I'm doing and reading those results, because there's somebody that's talking to ChatGPT all day, every day on the premium tier. And they're saying, what do you think about my approach to today's activity list? What would you toggle with? Like, they're having an iterative conversation with a objective third party source that has access to every documented piece of information ever. That scares me, that I'm not doing enough prompt engineering. I'm not even feeding in enough ballparks of query information into AI to render results that could benefit my life in some ways. And maybe that's me being paranoid.
No, you're problem aware, which is better than a lot of people. People think that they can just put like a sentence into ChatGPT and then get the result. I'm like, oh, I'm done. Whereas like that's a whole other rabbit hole. I would love to communicate with you, and I can give you, I can help you with that. It's something I have a unique ability with, or at least experience. But super self-aware answer there, Carson. Now here's the onus to pay it forward. What question would you like to give the next guest without knowing who they are?
That's a great question. How they balance being at the extremes of utter belief in what they're doing and the utter reality of why. How do you live at both extremes of why this podcast, why this digital consultancy is going to be the best in the world, and also be objective as to the top 5 reasons as to why it will likely fail?
How do you balance between objectivity and idealism, like romantic and real, sort of?
Well, I have to sell Dallas Meetup all day, every day, and be the most bullish about it. And so I'm kind of on one side of the spectrum. And then you have to go look at the actual bank accounts and the accounts receivable and pipeline, and be honest about, well, what kind of runway do I actually have here? What am I looking at? What does my Maslow's hierarchy look like? And sometimes it's hard to stand in the paint and take the charge. Some days you might feel down. You haven't made a sale in 7 days or whatever it is. And then you get a phone call from a sponsor that, walk me through the rate sheet. Okay, what would it look like annually? And you're like,
that was easy.
Thank goodness I stood there with a straight face and said this, because they are moving forward with utter sincerity. And, I can't let the last 5 days kind of color how I'm doing today's work.
That's maybe one of the most important questions for people that are not that seasoned CEO that you experienced. Feel like gathering, which is most of us, honestly. It's like, how do you maintain that bullish belief while also confront the reality that like there's things that need to be solved without losing enthusiasm?
How do you reach down deep? Like, one of the most pivotal conversations that he ever, and I know we need to go, but in closing, like one of the best conversations we ever had is he told me, Carson, I am not responsible for your self-confidence. So I don't care how you generate it. He said, you might be the type that needs to go do 100 push-ups, run 5 miles, have an illicit affair, get drunk. I don't know what it is that you need to do to generate that momentum externally, but you bring it here tomorrow at 9 a.m. That's external. I don't generate that for you. The sale of this product does not generate that for you. So go scrounge and come back with the ingredients to build the self-confidence cake necessary to treat this accordingly.
Love that. Well, with that, last question is, Carson, where can people find you and get in touch?
DallasMeetup.com. DallasMeetup.com has all of our events listed. They're listed by their cohort theme. So CPG, economic development. We have an upcoming meetup in a month, August 7th. Maybe this is coming out around the same time, but we'll meet in August and November of this year for consumer packaged good cohort and a commercial real estate and property tech cohort. So everybody can sign up for free at DallasMeetup.com.
Awesome. Everyone
I really
listening,
appreciate you having me.
thank you, Carson. It was a pleasure. And for everyone listening, I don't run ads in the show. My only ask is if you found this conversation valuable, share it with a friend. Till next time, be well. And remember, confidence comes from within.